All right, guys, we're here for an episode today of our Sin City success stories. Today, we're talking to the founder of Flight Vector, Scot Cromer. And as you can see, he's doing pretty well. So we're at his crib, we're gonna hop in, we're gonna give him an interview. So let's go meet Scot and take a little tour of his house. Dude, look at the size of this roof up here. Oh my gosh, absolutely insane. Here's our guy. Hey Scot, what's going on,
welcome.
man? Thank you so much for having us over. We appreciate it to come over here and check it out.
Yeah.
Man, how has it been kind of living on top of the hill with this absolutely amazing
The view does not get old.
Guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle Podcast. This is a brand new part of our Sin City success stories, and I'm here with Scot Cromer. Scot, thanks so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it. So we're here to talk about your entrepreneurial journey, but also the amazing company that you created, Flight Vector. So one of the things that I think about is often in today's world, we think about businesses like drop shipping. We think about all the other consumer coaching businesses that are so popular in today's world, but your business is completely different. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Flight Vector and kind of what it does and the service that you guys provide?
So Flight Vector is used mostly in the emergency medical field to dispatch assets, whether it's an air or ground asset, to the scene, or just even transport patients from one location to another. And so we have the ability to capture everything from the beginning, when phone call comes in, all the way to the end when the transport has been complete. We share all that data with a number of systems. We interface with 60 different other systems. So we can share the data with a patient charting system, or we can share the data with a billing system. And so all of that's stored in the database, and it stays there for as long as they want it. So there's always the ability to go back in and get the data about that transport.
How did you come up with this business in the first place?
So I actually, everything happens for a reason, and it's always timing. And for me, I was writing software for a company that became that Garmin bought. And because of that, it was a multifunction display that's used in aircraft. And we interface with a number of different systems. So I got to know a lot of people. There was a company in Kansas that wanted a dispatch software, but they didn't like what was out there. So they talked to somebody that I know and told them about it. And he said, well, I think I know someone who could probably do this. So he got a hold of me, and we met. They explained what they were looking for. And I told them, okay, I can do this, but I'm going to make a business out of it, and I'll get you guys the first version. So that's what started the whole process.
So when you're working for Garmin back in the day, you're working for a big organization. And my question for you is, when that opportunity pops up, did you have any hesitancy to kind of pursue that and say, I'm going to start my own business? Did the company that you were working for at the time say it was okay for you to do this stuff? Or like, what was that kind of journey like?
So the interesting thing about that part of my life is I had already wrote software, and we had started 2 other companies, even when I was doing this. So it was, 20 hours a day type of thing, besides doing what I'm normally doing and the other stuff that we've been working on. So everything with that was kind of coming together, and it made it easy at the time to decide I'm going to leave this stable environment, and I have something that's going to last me for a little while. I'm going to go out and start pursuing everything.
Man, it sounds like the classic elements of kind of like the entrepreneurial journey of like taking that big leap. I want to back up a little bit and kind of talk about how you got into the space of software development. So knowing that entrepreneurship is a huge part of your life today, did you have any early influences that kind of showed you that being an entrepreneur is possible? What was your like parents like? Like what were they doing? Did you have any examples early?
You know, it's funny when I think about this. In high school, so I'm just turned 57. When I was in high school, computers were just becoming a thing. And my sophomore year of high school, I took a computer class. The seniors had to take the computer class. And we'd get an assignment that day. I'd go home that night. I'd get it all coded, come in the next day. And you had 2 weeks to do this, but I would implement everything, watch it work, and then play Star Trek, I think is what we did back then for 2 weeks. And the seniors that had to take the class and pass it saw me playing games, and I started selling the software to them.
No way.
Yes. And so I thought, you know what, if I can make money in high school doing this, maybe this is what I want to do.
Man, it sounds like you had some of those early experiences of being an entrepreneur. So like when people are approaching you and asking, hey, can you basically do our homework for us? What was kind of your response? Did you have like that moral kind of tug that I guess you would have like naturally?
I didn't look at it that way. You know, it's just like today. I wrote software. You wanted my software, I'll sell it to you.
Yeah.
And so that's what my, Flight Vector does that today. You have one source code, one source base with that program, but you sell it over and over and over.
Isn't that an amazing thing about software? I mean, when I started getting into my entrepreneurial journey, I started thinking about like, how can I make myself as scalable as possible? And back in the day when we started our telehealth company, we had a lot of hardware. It was basically like iPads and hardware systems. And in 2019, I started pushing everybody towards developing software because it made us so much more scalable. And then the pandemic occurred and everybody needed software. But one of the early lessons I learned was if you can duplicate something without cost, it's an amazing way to just spread, how your business grows.
Exactly.
It's crazy. Did you ever start any other type of businesses that weren't software based?
No. Everything that I've done so far has been software based.
Wow. So I have a question for you. When it comes to kind of identifying the opportunities and the gaps that were in the marketplace, so you're working for Garmin early, somebody comes to you and says, hey, we've got a multifaceted system that we need developed. What was it that Garmin wasn't doing at that time that you kind of saw the opportunity to make this Flight Vector, I guess, opportunity something that was real?
So everything that we were doing with Garmin was avionics. And this system that we have today did not need any avionics. So it was all ground-based system. And when I looked at it, the other competitors that were out there at the time, they came at it from the medical perspective. They were maybe created by doctors, and they were worried about everything on the medical side. But having the aviation background, I looked at it and said, wait a minute, you may have pilots going over their duty time. That could be a fine. And so I came at it from the aviation side and made sure that they adhere to all the FAA regulations so they don't have any issues, which, maybe the medical people weren't so concerned about that at the time. And that's what differentiated us at the time from from our competitors.
Man, when it comes to developing a software platform like that, how did you kind of incorporate like customer feedback? Did you go out and start like interviewing people or asking questions about like what would make the best system possible? Because I know that medical space in itself is often kind of very narrow pointed, like this is what the system needs to look like. And it seems like you were coming at it from like a different angle.
Yeah, and everything that we have in the system, besides our core aviation pieces of it that we started with, is all based on what our customers have to say about it. So as we got customers, we start off with your first customer, and we spent almost a year developing everything around this first customer. And then we were able to go and start selling it to other customers. So by the time in this industry, which was small, that we were able to get a couple more customers, then we get the feedback. I mean, customers aren't afraid to tell you what they think about things.
Yeah.
And so you start to develop the software around what they need, and next thing you know, you got another customer. Now you got more feedback. And so we just continue to this day, all of our features that we have are based on our customer suggestions.
I had when we were developing our first like real telehealth platform, the COO of that organization up in Seattle, who we work with to this day, said, we are willing to be your first because we're willing to ride the bike as we're building it. Mm-hmm. Did they kind of have that same mentality to be able to say like, hey, listen, we know you're building this. We're your first customer. Did they know you were they were your first customer as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So when we right out the gate, everyone knew you're our first customer. We're going to build this together. And so there was a lot of testing, trials, tribulations, all that. And so,
man, I wonder so when we start off a new company, often we're the only person who's in the shop pulling late hours, early mornings. What was it like in those early days when you were kind of building the company? Were you kind of showing up doing those 15-hour days, those 20-hour days? What was that like?
Oh, absolutely. 15-hour days, 7 days a week. I was the software engineer. I was the CFO, the COO, the CEO, the janitor. I mean, everything. I wore so many hats, and it took a few years before I was able to finally get some traction and hire somebody.
Were those early days kind of like cash strapped? Were you in kind of the position where you didn't have the resources to invest into the team and stuff like that? Was it stressful? What was that like?
No, because of all the other things I was doing, I was working too much. Mm-hmm. But I had two other sources of income at the time that based on a company that I'd started with some buddies of mine and doing some software work for another company. So I had the two sources of income already and working on this. And it was a lot, but I think one time in my whole that whole time before I got that really big customer, I think I told my wife one time, well, maybe I should go out and get a real job instead of playing around with this. But stuck with it, and it turned out.
How do you feel like tenacity has kind of played a role in your life, especially as an entrepreneur? And I know like one of the things I've been focusing on a lot more recently is kind of the relationship we have with our partner has a huge element of if we fail or if we succeed. And so it sounds like your wife was incredibly supportive of you in those early days and trying to do all this work.
Oh, yes. Yeah. She helped out as much as she could. And, kids growing up at home. So she took care of a lot of things. And that was the nice part. We've been remote since I started this business, and I always tell people, we did it before it was cool. Mm-hmm. COVID happened. If I didn't know COVID was happening, nothing was different. Everyone's still working at home, and so we've had that, that ability to bring people to the company, even during times like that. And we found even better people that way because, it's tough to go into a market. Let's just say I wanted to look in Las Vegas and find everyone that I need to fill a position. I could probably do it over time, but I don't know if I can replace this person and that person just because of being here. So everyone that has worked for us has worked from home, and almost everyone has another significant other that's been supporting them. And that's, I think, helped.
I feel like that's one of the huge advantages of being a software company in the first place is you do have that anonymity to be able to be flexible and do the things that you want to do. And I feel like that's an early part of your success. I kind of want to talk about the process of like scaling from a one-person team into a multi-person team. Who was your first big hire that you had that really kind of had an impact on your business?
So the first hire I had was a developer in the same town I was in. I was in Oregon. And actually, two of my best friends, one was a football coach and one was the athletic director. And I told them, I don't have a lot of money. I got to start looking for someone. And they both looked at me and said, well, we've got this guy, Peter Reed, and he's on the track team. That's how they knew him from a sports aspect. Genius. And so I hired him in high school. And
he was in high school?
He was in high school.
How old were you at this time?
35 or 36 maybe.
No way. So you're putting all the trust of your first hire into a young boy genius.
Yes. Yeah. And he worked for me through college. So he got his bachelor and his master's all in 4 years. And I happened to get a really big contract with the state of Maryland at the same time he was getting ready to graduate. and he had offers. And so I was able to get a better offer to him. And so he came to work for us. And I had enough to probably, maybe for a year or two, the two of us can continue on. And I thought, well, let's do it and see what happens. And, we'll figure out some stuff if a year or two from now, we didn't get any other customers.
So my question for you is, this kind of goes to like a fundraising perspective. When I think of software today, everybody's talking about raising money. And you go out to the marketplace, you get VCs and things like that. It sounds like you were maybe bootstrapped in these early days, or kind of how did you leverage? Was it all human capital, or what did you do?
It was all bootstrapped. So I funded myself up to that point because I had those other sources of income. So I was able to have money coming in. It's just I'm working 15, 16 hours a day. Once I got that big contract, I was able to hire someone who really helped build up a lot of the software. And at that point, we went from maybe 2 or 3 customers, and then we've gone to today close to, well, if you take all of our software capabilities or all of our software components that we have, probably about 150, 160 customers.
So how do we grow this business? Because obviously you can't be, if you're talking about your first customer coming from Maryland, you're not knocking on doors, or like you networking, or like, what is the process like of acquiring customers?
In this industry, it's very small. Everybody knows everybody. And there's an annual conference you go to. So people would see us. And the first couple of years I went there, it was, oh, hey, there's the new kid on the block. Let's see if they're here again next year. And so next year comes around. Oh, okay, the new kid on the block's still here. Well, let's give him one more year before we decide that we're going to pull the trigger and maybe see what he has to do. So, after a few years, they start looking at what you have. And we had enough customers interested in the way we did things and that. So we started building our customer base. Once you do that, they start talking. One of the higher turnover jobs in the industry is dispatchers. So if they leave one customer, they'll go to another one. And as soon as they get there, hey, I was using Flight Vector at my old company. You guys, I think we should look at it. So then that gets the ball rolling there. We haven't done any marketing other than being at the shows. Everyone talks, and as you grow the company, it's just small enough that everyone knows everyone else.
Did those early days of them saying, you're the new kid on the block, let's see if you're around here next year, that kind of put like a chip on your shoulder to be like, I'm going to show you guys what's going on. I'll be here and I'm going to dominate this entire sector?
It did a little bit. Yeah. I mean, I knew I was going to be here. And it was fun going back to those shows every year. And now not only are we here, but we went from a 10 by 10 booth to a 20 by 20 booth. And, we went from one person there to 6 people in the booth. So it was nice for that progression and to show people we're here to stay and we're just going to keep building our software.
Man, when I think about the world of business today, there's 2 ways to grow your business. You can go out and you can market and you can advertise, right? But that in itself, because of the marketplace, is a diminishing return because on all platforms it's becoming more and more expensive. So it costs more money to acquire customers every year. And it sounds like your competitive advantage was the experience and the overall product that you guys built. Because when you had dispatchers who were unhappy when they moved to a different job, they'd say, hey, we need to use Flight Vector. So do you think like your product in itself was really kind of your competitive advantage, which gave you that organic growth?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. And as more and more people got to know what we did, and like I said, we listened to our customers. So we're building software now based on what our customers are saying. This is what we need to really make our business do well within the communication center. So we're building what they want, and we're providing it to more and more customers that are now familiar with us because maybe someone is working where that didn't work there before.
Did you guys have any type of, because you guys are serving dispatchers primarily and the experience that they have, did you ever put into place any type of customer success managers or people like that who really kind of like manage the relationships and made those people happy?
So we do have, we've done like maybe one customer success manager for the company. And we're getting to that point now, though, where we're going to start hiring more. It's just, you can handle so many customers with one person. And that's what we've been doing lately is we're on a big growth spurt for hiring people to come into the company.
Why are you guys growing so much?
We're getting more and more companies that are very interested in what we're doing, more enterprise-wide companies. And so we're having to hire more and more people to help with all that.
I know that one of the biggest challenges we face as companies in general, especially leaders like you, is how do you kind of build the team, but the culture within the team? Because you guys are all remote, you guys are doing so much different stuff. So how do you kind of approach culture and kind of making sure everybody's congealed, especially in like this remote world?
That's one of the things. We would have a lot of the team interview people just to make sure we all seem to get along, and that helped a lot. It wasn't just me saying, okay, I want this person and this is what we're going to have. We would really, vote them off the island if that was the case, if we didn't want it, but we had to vote them on the island as well. And as the majority ruled. And that's helped a lot with bringing people in that do work well with everyone that is remote.
I have a question kind of about your leadership style. So I know that this has been your baby since day one. You're working the 20-hour days, you're grinding 7 days a week. How do you start putting trust in the people who are now your generals and lieutenants, especially when it comes to like making sure that the business is doing what it's going to do and showing up as you're supposed to with the expectations you guys have in the marketplace?
So it became quite easy for me to do that because I had no choice. We had too much stuff going on. And if I were to try to take it all on myself, nothing would get done. So immediately I had trust in the people that I had working for me that were doing the things I needed them to do and reporting back. So the key is communication. As long as, I can have 30 people out there doing things. As long as they're reporting back that this is what's going on, these are the hiccups we have run into, or these are the success stories that we've had so far. Having that information helps guide the company down the path that we want to go. But communication's just the number one thing. And for us, it was, that communication helped us with customer service. Because as far as we're concerned, customer service is, for our customers, the number one thing. And, we've even helped customers call in for support on something, my printer's not working. Well, that's not us, but you know what? We're going to help you get that printer going. And you do things like that, and they remember that. And that's helped us through the entire process.
I mean, it sounds like you guys go above and beyond for everybody.
We have. And I've had some of our team members say, it's so-and-so calling, and I know they're going to have a question that's not software related, but they know as well. Even though it's tough to do sometimes, they want to do it because they want them to, at the end of the day, be able to say, that team at Flight Vector is so good. We really enjoy working with them. And you know what? Hey, they even helped me with my printer one day. And so it's been our formula for success.
How about negative team members? Because I know that every hire you've made, maybe it hasn't been a perfect hire. So
yes.
You kind of had people who have been oil to your guys' water.
Yes.
How have you kind of approached the process of letting them go? Because one thing that I really focus on today, because I speak to so many different business leaders, we talk about culture a lot. And often I feel like there's a misconception that an A player who is toxic to your team is worth keeping because of the results that they bring. So how do you kind of identify when somebody's not a good team member, and how do you kind of like usher them out of your business? So
we've had a handful of team members that we've hired that we thought would be good, and they weren't. And it always starts with a talk with them to go through and see, is there something going on that we need to know about, that I need to know about? And give them some time to be able to correct things. And generally, if they're going to be able to correct them, we're going to know pretty quick. If not, we've had to let them go. And that is the toughest part. I've never been in a position, or thought that I'd be in a position where I'd have to let people go. I'd rather just hire people and everyone's happy. But we know how this goes, and not everyone is going to be the right fit. It's going to sound like they may be to begin with, but then they end up not. And it doesn't take long, especially in the software world. It's pretty quick to find out if someone's going to fit in or not, if they're developers. So give them a little bit of time to see if they can make it, and if they can't, you got to get rid of them and move on.
How would you consider your leadership style? Because one of the things that I've always appreciated about you is you are one of the most genuine, nice people who I've ever met. And to talk about kind of where we're sitting today, looking over Vegas, We've got an amazing house. We've got an amazing view. And it seems like you've always been so grounded and so humble. So my question for you is, did you grow up looking at any type of leaders like Steve Jobs as an example, who were just these tyrants and kind of like leveraged and ran with an iron fist? How would you kind of consider your leadership style and maybe contrast to some of those people?
So my role model really was my dad. So he was the executive vice president of the power company. And everything I learned from leadership, I spent so much time with him, and I worked at the power company during the summers. So I learned a lot from him. And it was, one of the things I wanted to do when I did this is I'm going to listen to everybody. Now, 5 people may say one thing, and if I really feel strong about it, I will veto it. But for the most part, I like to get everyone's feedback, spend some time to think about it, and then make a decision that feels right based on what everyone has to say about it. And that does, I think, keep you grounded. I've never been one of those iron fist people that said this is my way or the highway. And there's been a couple decisions that I've said, okay, I may not agree with this, but we're going to try it because most of you think that this may be the way to go. Some of them have been worked. Some of them I've been able to sit back and tell myself, okay, I told you so, but I'm not going to tell you I told you so. Yeah. I'm just going to think it that night and move on to the next day.
Do you have an example that you can kind of just give us at like a high level view of like one time when you thought you were right, but your team came with a better solution and everything worked out for you?
Oh boy, put me on the spot like that. I think that if I had to think of one time, it was probably on a hire of somebody. And I just wasn't sure that was the right person. And they all said, we think they are right. And so okay, fine, we'll do it. And it turned out that the team was right. And so I didn't voice my opinion that much when it was during the process. But they were right about that. And I'm glad because it worked out for the whole team.
That's got to almost give you like that proud Papa Bear type moment. Do you know what I mean? Because you built a culture where everybody can make good decisions and they're doing the best by the group and you don't have to oversee all of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, exactly. And, I have people in places that I trust within the company so that they can continue on. And if I have to be somewhere else, I know that things are going to happen. And if there is an issue, they'll let me know. But I created a well-oiled machine is how I like to look at it. So I could, if I one day needed to go and entertain some client somewhere, or I get invited to a golf tournament by a customer, I don't have to worry about what's going on in the office. They've got it all handled, and I'm able to step aside and do things like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. I want to ask you kind of about your personal journey. So has there ever been a time in your entrepreneurial journey building Flight Vector where you just felt like you were the most challenged, like when the darkest days, because every day can't be a good day, right?
After we got started, I think it was a year into it, and I teamed up with another company, and we went to the show, our air medical transport conference. Day one of showing up to that show, we got served with a lawsuit by one of our competitors. And
what was the lawsuit?
Joint infringement on their patent.
Okay.
And so, here I am. How am I going to handle this? How am I going to deal with this? And so it took 3 years to get out of the lawsuit. We went to trial. We lost. They continued. I was finally able to get out of it because the joint infringement lawsuit meant the two of us together when we teamed up. But based on our contracts, and I will always thank my original attorney and how he prepared our contracts, but based on our contract, it specifically said there's no joint infringement here. I mean, we don't control them, they don't control us. So everything that meets the definition of the law for joint infringement, we had a contract that said they don't do it. But yet everyone in the court just decided that, we're going to lose. So the judge eventually let us out. And those 3 years were some of the darkest ones. I remember that competitor that did that. They're no longer in the industry anymore. And they called me one time, and I was standing in my front yard, and they offered me I think it was I think it was $100,000 that they would pay me, and they'd make it go away. And I thought about it for a minute, because I had way more than that from lawyer fees. And I just decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to really make this thing go. And so I told them, forget it. And today, now they got bought by one of the competitors, our last competitor, and then they shut it down. And they're actually paying us to service their customers.
Oh man, that's got to feel sweet.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So let's talk about so you get sued right before you go into the show. You're early in your entrepreneurial journey, first year. How do you kind of refocus yourself in those moments when it seems like the world's falling down? Because I know you have to show up. You're also the CEO, the CFO, all these people at the time. So how are you showing up at the show with like the positive mindset of like, we're going to make this go, especially when everybody else is talking about, we'll see if you're here in a year. And this is a formidable threat by somebody laying you with like a lawsuit. What was that kind of process of like keeping your mind right?
I'd look back at that time and I wonder if I was even thinking about what was happening, because I don't know. I know we were going through this whole thing, and I still had my other sources of income, and so I still had stuff that I was doing. But at this time now, I was spending more of that on attorney fees. And I think the only thing that actually kept me going with that is knowing that we didn't do anything wrong, and I figured that the courts would finally realize that. That's probably the only thing that kept me going and trying to be positive. But it was just one of those things where, back to the grindstone every day, trying to make this work, and hope that the time I spend on it was worth it.
That's what I think about from like a journey of entrepreneurship perspective. Like we spend years, so many nights laying asleep, waiting and thinking about, is this actually going to be worth it someday? And I feel like we don't actually see the reward until the one day when we hit a huge milestone, right? So what was one of your first like key milestones that highlighted your success that kind of kept you going to say like, hey, I'm actually making it, and it doesn't seem like I'm kind of like navigating into this world of darkness?
That was the Maryland State Police contract. That's when I thought, okay, we have enough money to keep going for a while. And at that point, our lawsuit was done, so we could start getting customers. No one would touch us during that 3 years because they didn't want to have a lawsuit and buy the software and then have to take it away. So that was the big moment of getting the letter from the judge saying, you are not part of this lawsuit anymore, and you can't be. And then getting that contract just shortly after it.
What was that feeling of celebration like? Because I'm sure you remember that day like it was still yesterday.
Yeah, I know I had an extra drink that night.
Yeah.
It just took so much weight off your shoulders, and but you celebrate for just a few minutes because then you're right back at doing your 15 hours a day so that you can get through everything and keep growing it.
I always think about kind of like a sense of ultimate accountability. And I'm going to kind of riff on this for a second, but because of my family heritage and where I came from, right? We came from humble beginnings. My great-grandfather was a sharecropper from Arkansas. My grandfather was born in 1930. My father was the first entrepreneur in my family. And he was the person who actually put me in a position to be successful. I think about the need for me to continue to show up every single day is kind of like I'm drawn towards just the highest version of myself. And I wonder if you kind of had those early experiences of saying like, yeah, we had this big victory with the Maryland Police Department, but what do I do now? And why did you kind of show up with that same hunger of trying to just like work those 15 hours and be successful? You've always had like that chip on your shoulder. Like, what's that like?
I mean, it's what I grew up with, is to be successful. And, I watched my dad climb the company ladder. And so that's what I knew, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I didn't know any other way, honestly. I wanted to be successful. And when I did, I remember when I think I was 10 years old, I remember I told somebody, I'm going to be worth $10 million someday. So I had it back in my mind then that I wanted to do something to be successful and to be able to enjoy it.
Do you believe in manifestation?
I haven't thought about that.
Because it sounds like very early on you were a 10-year-old saying, I'm going to be worth $10 million someday. Do you know what I mean? That like doesn't come out of nowhere. And I feel like we have so many subconscious thoughts. I mean, if my dad always said, if you see it, you can, or if you believe it, you can achieve it. Yeah. And that was something I really didn't put a lot of emphasis on when I was younger until I started getting into the times of hardship, where it's like our mindset completely transforms the way we see the world. I mean, if people have negative thoughts on a daily basis, they see a negative world around them and they limit their own exposure to opportunity. And so I think maybe you had a little bit of that hard programming in your brain that was getting you to be successful, and you were willing to do the work that was necessary.
Yeah, and a lot of it for me is I don't even see it. I mean, it's who I think I've always been. And so to stop and think about it, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. But at the time and all the way through my career, I never stopped to think about it. It just happened.
There's a really powerful book out there. It's called The Gap and the Gain. And it's about people with high achieving mindsets. And it talks about people with high achieving mindsets often find themselves in the distance of where I'm at right now and where I'm going. And the guy in the book uses the horizon as the metaphor. Mm-hmm. And he says, you can run and sprint and even fly towards the horizon as fast as you want, but you'll never catch it. And often when we're on this world domination path of like, I need to be successful, I'm going to do these things, we find ourselves in the gap of where we're at and where we're trying to get to. And so sometimes we feel like we're a little let down and we have to fulfill that hole, if you will. Mm-hmm. And the gain on the opposite side of that is pausing with a form of gratitude and looking backwards to see how far we've come. Do you ever think you find yourself in that gap of where you're at right now and where you're trying to get to, even with all of your success today?
No. And just as you're talking about that, I haven't had time to even think about being in a gap. We have been, since I started this, and well, since Maryland State Police on, it has been the biggest challenge I've had is how do I slow down sales so that my developers can catch up to where we need to be. I've been told a couple times during this process that, hey, you got to quit selling. You've got to quit making customers want to buy the software because we can't keep up and there's too much stuff we have to do. So I just don't think I've ever been in that gap. It's always been, right around the corner, there's somebody else that wants to start using the software and somebody else. So it's trying to space them out so that we can handle everything. And I just haven't seen that gap.
I think that's an amazing gift to have. And I feel like you are an outlier when it comes to that entrepreneurial experience, because many of us are grinding and trying to figure out how we're going to survive today so we can get till tomorrow. But it seems like you have so much overload of inbound business that's coming your way that you have a different problem.
Yeah. And, I've said this a million times in my life is you got to be at the right place at the right time. And so many things in my life have happened because of that. And building the business the same way. We've always had, once we started having success, it was more success and more success. Even when we weren't sure or weren't looking for it, it just continued to come to us. And so I've been blessed with that. We are kind of an outlier. When I look at when companies have evaluated us and they look at our numbers, it's okay. We haven't seen every company that's able to do something like this. And so it's good, but it's different. And so when you start talking about companies that aren't like that, I don't look and say, well, I'm going to look down on you. Well, it's just I was at the right place at the right time. We did the things that we needed to do, and that allowed us to succeed.
I want to talk about the opposite side of the gap, which is the gain. How often do you kind of slow down and appreciate all the things you've been able to accomplish? Because before we hopped on here, we were out in your garage and we're looking at your Ferrari, we're looking at your C8, you're talking about your new Z06 coming, and those are material things. But you also have like a happy and a healthy family that surrounds you as well. Do you get enough time to kind of pause and reflect on all the things you guys have accomplished together and the memories you guys have made?
More so now than we did before. I think it was probably about a year ago where I was able to start with this well-oiled machine that I had now. I was able to step back and let it do its thing and just be there in case, it goes off to the wrong direction, but be able to enjoy the family time and spend some more time doing things that I'd like to do. I would have to really think about it. I still don't know to this day if I've ever had a vacation where I didn't do some business. Mm-hmm. And that's my goal now, is to take a vacation not have to answer a phone call, not have to deal with an email, anything, just be on vacation. And I'm hoping it's going to happen soon.
I feel like, in this world of entrepreneurship today, there's so much talk about starting a business that takes no time for you to operate. And we all want to get to the position where Scott is in now, where you're able to say, I want to take time off, I want to be a little bit more present. And I feel like there's a misconception in the marketplace because a lot of the people who are talking about that work-life balance, if you will, are the people who are successful. And now we're trying to emulate the life that they have, like Scott. I want to be able to take vacations, I want to do these things. So let's talk about, I guess, a message for an entrepreneur today who's trying to start a business. And I guess the hard truth of realizing that you're going to go through those years of grinding, those years of showing up 15 hours a day, and why those are so important.
Yeah, and I don't know anything else but that grind. And it's the most important thing you can do is stay the course. And if you have an idea and you want to see it through, just continue to work at it. And hopefully you also have the being at the right place at the right time part of it. I mean, there's a lot of hard work involved with this, but there's a little bit of luck too. And so you've got to, things have to align a little bit with you. But if you just continue the hard work, and it's something that you believe in, then hopefully everything will work out for you.
Yeah, I know. I was listening to this podcast earlier today, and it was talking about a season of no. It's like sometimes you have to go through the season of saying no to all the stuff that's distracting you from getting to where you want to get to. And I feel like in this world of exposure to social media and everything else, there's so many opportunities for us to get off course. And so do you feel like you definitely went through that season of no, where you had to say no to the birthday parties, no to going on vacation, no to going to do this stuff?
Yes, I've said no, or I've done it, and then I'm the one on the beach with a computer on my lap, or I'm getting up at 5 a.m. 3 hours before the family gets up, so I can get 3 hours of work in. I think about no, and with customers, I don't say no to customers. And my answer has always been, it's just software. Of course we can do it. And I've brought that into the life with that as well. If maybe I won't say no, but I will find a way to do what I need to do with that and get the other the work done that I need to do. Whether it's I'll show up, hey, I'm going to be there, but I'm going to be an hour late, or I got to leave an hour early so I can get some stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I want to ask you kind of a question as we look towards the future. So what is your vision for the future of Flight Vector? And how does, the way that the industry is consistently evolving and things like that kind of give you a vision on like the next 10 years, if you will?
So my vision with Flight Vector is, of course, world domination. So I'd love to get every customer that we have in the U.S., in Canada, go overseas is what I want to do next, and really increase our market share that we have. I want to see more AI built into the software. We've started some of that process by being able to automatically schedule vehicles for dispatchers. So they just sit back, they put in, we need to transport this patient at this time, but we will go through and figure out, okay, the optimal time is here, not there, and we'll rearrange everything, and we will take in consideration what happened yesterday and what happened the day before to help figure out ways to automate some of this so that they're not having to deal with it all the time. They can sit back and watch it, and if something happens, they can say something. But I want to see more of artificial intelligence programming as part of Flight Vector.
I really want to kind of dive into that for a second, because AI has been a hot topic since November of 2022. How are you guys kind of approaching AI? Because everybody thinks about like ChatGPT as an example. But if we're talking about using kind of like an information flywheel, you guys have enough data on all these transfers to start informing the systems that you provide services for about the best time to do those things.
Yes.
And so how are you guys kind of attacking the AI conversation, and what does it really mean to you guys?
Slowly is how we're attacking it right now. And just like you said, so we have data. We have years of data on what's happened at particular locations. So you can use that information now to say, okay, tomorrow you need to put an ambulance out at the corner of 1st and Main, and something's going to happen. They will be closer to the accident. They'll be able to get there. So in putting or adding capabilities like that into the software based on what we have learned over the years is what we want to do. But we are doing it slowly so that we make sure we get it right. And that's the biggest thing with some of that stuff is you get nervous about, hey, do I want AI taking over everything? Do I want to just be able to walk out of the room and it does everything and notifies everyone? Mm-hmm. I still am old school where, okay, I will trust this a little bit, but I still want to verify it. And so that's why we're taking the time to go through it and make sure everything is right as we do it.
Because I feel like you guys have a reputation to manage as well.
Yes.
And I feel like with the rush, if you will, to try and put out information about AI, everybody has an AI integrated system these days. But how is it going to have a negative or a positive impact on your reputation? Because you guys are word of mouth. That's how you guys have grown customers. And I would hate to see the day where you guys unleash an AI system and all of a sudden things get swirly and then you got people talking about you.
Yeah. And that's the biggest thing we have to worry about is because this market is so small and everyone talks, it has to be right. And, we've spent extra time on releases just to make sure that we have it right before we go ahead and release it to the general population, because it's our reputation at stake, and we want to make sure that everything goes well.
Yeah. How do you kind of balance that mindset, if you will? Because I know you got younger people in your organization as well, and they want to kind of push the envelope, if you will, forward when it comes to this AI stuff. So how are you kind of playing like the anchor that says like, hey, let's approach this a little bit slower? Do you have to kind of like navigate that?
No, I don't. I mean, it's been navigating itself a little bit because there's so much work that we slow down ourselves just to try to get all the work done. And everyone has great ideas, and implementing these great ideas just, it takes some time. And then on top of that, all of the testing and the regression testing and everything you do in the software business, it doesn't allow for something like that to come out too fast. Mm-hmm. And so I guess we kind of self-throttle ourselves by implementing it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to kind of wrap up here today by asking you to give a message to the future of entrepreneurs, because a lot of people who watch the show are in their young 20s, young 30s. We're getting started in our professional careers. And I think sometimes we're in a rush, if you will, to get things done. And it sounds like you've had an approach of taking things slow, but being methodical, and how you kind of move the chess pieces across the board for your success that we kind of can display here today. So what would you say to the future generation of these entrepreneurs?
That is the biggest thing I do is and again, I'll go back to, maybe I'm old school, but I like to make sure that everything looks right and then move on. So I also see today, though, people become successful so quick with some of the social media capabilities they have. So my advice on anyone wanting to get in and being an entrepreneur is take the time to build what you want to build, create what you want to create, and just stick with it. It doesn't have to be done overnight. I know people want to just see overnight success, but you can still take the time to do it and still be successful. That way you're doing it right.